What's concerning isn't that the 12 items in this video will disappear tomorrow. You may still see them on the shelves, but the prices underneath them may start to look completely different. A food crisis doesn't necessarily begin with empty shelves. It can begin with rising prices, smaller packages, fewer sales, cheaper options disappearing, and then even the item you switch to in order to save money starts getting more expensive. Behind those price tags is a chain of very different problems. A smaller cattle herd, weaker harvests, unpredictable weather, processing plants shutting down, and commodity markets thousands of miles away from the grocery store that still eventually find their way onto your bill. And in this video, we're going to look at 12 items facing those pressures in different ways, and why their normal price may be the first thing to disappear. 12. Fresh apples. Let's start with something so ordinary that most of us never think to track it like a commodity: an apple. For many people, especially those who have been buying groceries for decades, apples have a price in memory. You don't need to know the CPI. You just look at the price tag and think, apples aren't supposed to cost this much. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said apple prices in the US were 11.1% higher than a year earlier. In just 1 month, prices rose another 2.2%, while food at home increased about 2.7% over 12 months. Apples are rising faster than overall grocery inflation. The second signal is in production. USDA forecast U.S. commercial apple production in 2026 at about 10.4 billion pounds, down 6% from the previous year. Washington, the largest producing state, was forecast to decline 2%. Pennsylvania fell 58% and Virginia fell 48%. Those last two states are smaller than Washington in scale, but the declines show that crop pressure is distributed very unevenly. With apples, a smaller crop doesn't mean every variety will be in short supply. What matters is grade, size, variety, and regional availability. If the amount of fruit meeting standards declines, retailers may have less room for deep promotions. But apples are still worth keeping on the menu. A medium apple provides fiber, vitamin C, water, and natural carbohydrates. Eating the peel after washing it helps retain more fiber. Apples are also easy to use. Eat them directly, slice them into oatmeal, salad, or yogurt. For storage, a common mistake is leaving an entire bag of apples on the counter too long. If you're not eating them right away, the refrigerator helps them keep their quality longer. Remove any apples that are bruised or starting to spoil early. An item that's getting more expensive becomes even more wasteful if you end up throwing it away. A simple money-saving tip is to compare prices by the pound, not just the package price. Bagged apples are sometimes cheaper than loose apples, but they only save money if you eat them all. Don't pay a premium for Honeycrisp if Gala, Fuji, or another variety is on sale and still fits your needs. USDA has not forecast exactly how much more apple prices will rise in the months ahead, but two signals are already clear. Retail prices are 11.1% higher than a year ago, while the 2026 crop is forecast to be 6% lower. That is quiet inflation. You still see apples in the same place as before. It's just that the price you remember, the familiar promotions, and the cheaper options may become harder and harder to find. 11. Turkey. What happens when the cheaper option becomes everyone's choice at the same time? Turkey is worth watching because it shows something that often happens when grocery prices change. Shoppers don't stop buying protein. They switch to a different kind of protein. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said beef and veal prices in the U.S. were 9.4% higher than a year earlier. Beef roasts rose as much as 13.5%. For a household trying to keep its grocery budget under control, the usual response isn't to remove protein from meals. They change the menu. A family may skip the beef roast and choose turkey. A retiree living on a fixed income may look at two price tags and choose the one that gives them more meals for the same amount of money. That is the substitution effect. But turkey is facing pressure of its own. In July, poultry prices overall were 0.5% lower than a year earlier. Chicken was 2.7% lower. But the category BLS calls other uncooked poultry, including turkey, was 8.4% higher. USDA also raised its 2026 wholesale turkey forecast to about 161 cents per pound. That doesn't mean the retail price will rise by exactly the same rate, but it shows that turkey is not outside the pressure in the protein market. If demand keeps shifting toward turkey while wholesale costs remain high, retailers may have less room for deep promotions. Turkey still has value because it provides protein, vitamin B12, selenium, and zinc. It's also flexible. Leftover roasted turkey can be used for sandwiches, soups, or casseroles, while ground turkey can replace beef in burgers, tacos, or pasta sauce. The important tip is not to buy a large turkey just because the price per pound is low if the household can't use it all. If you're not going to use it soon, freezing is a reasonable option. Cooked turkey should be divided into smaller portions before refrigerating or freezing to reduce waste. Compare price per pound between whole turkey, turkey breast, and ground turkey instead of looking only at the total package price. And that's the problem. You skip beef because it's too expensive, switch to turkey to save money, and then discover that the price gap between the expensive choice and the cheaper choice is getting smaller. When the substitute also starts losing its price advantage, substitution no longer protects the grocery budget as well as it used to. 10. Sugar. One of the most notable signals for sugar in 2026 did not appear at a grocery store in the United States. It appeared thousands of miles away, in India. On August 20th, 2026, India allowed duty-free imports of up to 1 million metric tons of raw sugar to cool its domestic market. What is notable is that India has long been among the world's largest sugar-producing countries, and for many years played an important role on the export side. Now that balance is reversing. A country that once sent sugar into the global market now has to return to that same market to buy additional supply. Production is weaker, weather is putting pressure on sugarcane, and domestic consumption remains high. In particular, sugarcane also has to serve another market: ethanol. In the current season, about 3 million metric tons of sugar in India have been diverted to ethanol production. That means the same sugarcane supply has to meet demand for both food and fuel. When a major exporter exports less and then becomes a buyer, the global market loses part of its familiar supply while also gaining new demand. Right after India's import decision, global sugar futures rose about 4%. In the United States, the story is still different for now. In July 2026, sugar and sugar substitutes were only about 0.5% higher than a year earlier. So this is not yet a retail price spike at American grocery stores. But commodity markets often change before the full impact appears in shelf prices. The United States still relies partly on imports, with Mexico playing an important role, to balance domestic sugar supply. So what needs to be watched in this coming months is whether weather pressure, ethanol demand, and India returning to the global market as a buyer are enough to keep global supply tight for longer. Sugar also appears in many processed foods, so any significant pressure at the commodity level can spread far beyond the bag of sugar itself. The most important signal is still this: a country that once sold sugar to the world is starting to buy it back from the world. This is not yet a retail crisis in the United States. This is an early warning that the global balance is changing. 9. Wild Alaska salmon. There is one very different thing about wild salmon compared with foods produced in factories. If demand rises, a factory can add shifts. But Alaska cannot ask a few million more salmon to come back next week. Wild salmon operate on their own biological clock. They have to return to the same river system where they were born during a relatively short fishing season. Fishermen and processors can prepare in advance, but in the end, nature decides how many fish actually show up. The 2025-26 season showed that pretty clearly. In the Togiak district of Bristol Bay, the preseason forecast expected the total sockeye salmon return to be about 530,000 fish. But by mid-August, the actual number was only close to 300,000 fish. The number of fish that passed through the fishing area to continue spawning by the end of the season reached about 119,300 fish, slightly below the lower end of the goal of 120,000 fish. Buyers in Togiak stopped purchasing on August 14th, marking the end of the fishing season. When production is low, the consequences do not stop with fishermen. Buyers have fewer fish to purchase. Processors also have less raw material to fillet, freeze, smoke, or can, while labor, refrigeration, transportation, and operating costs still remain. Higher salmon prices do not mean everyone in the chain is making more money. Fishermen may sell lower volume, while processors have to spread fixed costs across a smaller amount of raw material. A strong fishing season in one area also does not always make up for weakness somewhere else. Buyers may need the right species, size, quality, or origin for a specific product. Nature does not distribute supply according to retailers' demand. For shoppers, the pressure may show up most clearly in wild salmon fillets, smoked salmon, and premium products that depend on the right type of raw material. Salmon is still worth keeping on the menu because it provides protein, omega-3, vitamin D, and vitamin B12. If fresh salmon is too expensive, frozen or canned forms can help control costs better. If buying fresh salmon, only buy the amount you can use soon or freeze properly. Frozen salmon should be kept stable in the freezer. Comparing prices by the pound and buying during promotions can also help reduce waste. When the fishing season ends, buyers and processors have to live with the amount of fish that was actually caught for the rest of the year. If weak fishing seasons appear in important areas or species, some premium wild salmon products may continue to face price pressure. A weak fishing season cannot be fixed by adding shifts. When the fishing season closes, most of the supply story has already been decided by nature until the next season. 8. Canned tuna. Shelf-stable seafood. There's a reason canned tuna has stayed in the pantries of millions of households for years. It's often where shoppers turn when fresh seafood gets too expensive. Fresh fish sits at the top of a price ladder. Frozen seafood usually sits in the middle. Canned tuna and shelf-stable seafood sit lower down. A quick, easy-to-store source of protein that is often easier on the grocery budget. But in July 2026, that ladder started to have a problem. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that fresh fish and seafood were 7.8% higher than a year earlier. Frozen fish and seafood were also up 7.8%, while shelf-stable fish and seafood were 6.1% higher. In other words, all three levels of the price ladder are higher than they were a year ago. That's why canned tuna is worth watching. Many households don't see it as a luxury. It's a quick lunch, sandwich filling, pantry protein, or backup when fresh seafood gets too expensive. For older adults, the advantage is even clearer. Small portions, no freezer needed before opening, and almost no need for a stove, thawing, or long preparation to get protein into a meal. Canned tuna provides high-quality protein vitamin B12, selenium, and omega-3. It can be used in sandwiches, salads, pasta, casseroles, or mixed with rice and vegetables to stretch a small can into a more complete meal. But one common mistake is looking only at the price of one can instead of the price per ounce. A package can look cheaper simply because it's smaller. Compare unit prices between cans, pouches, and multi-packs. Light tuna is usually cheaper than albacore and generally contains less mercury as well, so variety is worth considering if tuna appears often on the menu. For storage, unopened cans should be kept in a cool, dry place away from high heat. Do not use cans that are swollen, leaking, or seriously damaged. After opening, leftovers should be transferred to a sealed container, refrigerated, and used soon. And don't buy an entire case just because it's on sale if the household rarely eats tuna. Shelf-stable does not mean you should buy unlimited amounts. A money-saving item still becomes waste if it ends up forgotten at the back of the pantry. And this is where the problem becomes clearest. When fresh seafood is too expensive, you step down to frozen. When frozen is still expensive, you step down to canned. But when even the bottom level is up more than 6%, shoppers start losing one of the grocery budget's most familiar escape routes. The fallback is still there. It's just not as cheap as it used to be. 7. White rice. Some foods in the pantry help fill you up, and some help make other expensive foods go farther. White rice belongs to the second group. A pot of rice can stretch beans, meat, soup, or vegetables into more portions. That's why rice isn't just food. For many households, it's a budget tool, but that cheap tool is starting to lose part of its advantage. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that rice prices in the United States were 2% higher than a year earlier. While food at home was up about 2.7%, rice rose at more than twice that rate. On the supply side, USDA in August forecast U.S. rice production for the 2026 to 2027 season at about 158.4 million hundredweight, the lowest level in 33 years. Imports are forecast to reach a record of about 49.8 million hundredweight, but higher imports still aren't enough to make supply abundant. Ending stocks are forecast at about 36 million hundredweight, down 33% from the previous year and the lowest level in 4 years. So the economics should be understood this way. Lower domestic production, record imports, but still tighter ending stocks, meaning overall supply remains under pressure. USDA currently forecasts a season average farm price of about $14.90 per hundredweight, up $2.40 from the previous season. Retail prices do not necessarily move exactly in line with farm prices, but these numbers show that pressure at the beginning of the supply chain has not disappeared. And rice matters because it is a multiplier food. A cup of rice isn't just a side dish. It can turn a small amount of chicken into more servings, make beans last for another meal, or make soup more filling. Nutritionally, white rice mainly provides carbohydrates and energy. Enriched white rice can also provide folate, iron, and some B vitamins. The money-saving tip with rice isn't just to find the cheapest bag. Think about cost per serving. A large bag can have a very low price per serving, but only if the household actually uses it all. A common mistake is buying too much and then leaving the bag open in the pantry. White rice should be kept in a sealed container, in a cool, dry place to avoid moisture and pantry pests. Buying an amount that matches how quickly you use it is often better than buying bulk just because the price per pound is lower. Cooked rice also needs to be refrigerated promptly instead of being left at room temperature for hours. The concern with rice isn't just that a bag costs a few dollars more. When a food that helps stretch other foods becomes more expensive, The household loses part of the buffer protecting the grocery budget. Rice doesn't have to become a luxury to create pressure. It just has to stop being as cheap as it used to be. 6. Pasta, bread, wheat-based foods. Consumers don't walk into a grocery store and buy wheat futures. They buy bread, pasta, flour, crackers, cereal, muffins, bakery products. That's why wheat is different from many of the items on this list. A disruption in wheat doesn't create one price tag. It can create dozens of price tags. In the United States, the supply signal is fairly clear right now. In August 2026, USDA forecast all wheat production at only about 1,531,000,000 bushels, down about 23% from 2025 and the lowest level since the 1970 to 1971 season. Ending stocks for the 2026 to 2027 season are also forecast to be about 22% lower than the previous year. But the story doesn't stop with the domestic crop. The Black Sea is one of the most important grain trade routes in the world. In August, attacks on port and shipping infrastructure in Russia and Ukraine disrupted shipments, delayed cargoes, and forced buyers to look for more expensive alternative sources. Chicago wheat futures have risen more than 17% since the beginning of July as the market reacted to this risk. That is the domino effect. Wheat leaves the farm and goes through the mill, becomes flour, and then moves into a wide range of products. So households do not necessarily see the same increase in everything. In July 2026, bread prices were 3.7% higher than a year earlier. White bread rose about 4%. Breakfast cereal rose 4.1%, while the rice, pasta, and cornmeal category rose 3.9%. A more expensive cow mainly puts pressure on the meat aisle. More expensive wheat can follow you from breakfast to dinner. Toast in the morning, crackers at lunch, pasta at night, flour for weekend baking. And this is also where shoppers can save more intelligently. With pasta and flour, compare cost per serving, not just the package price. Store brands often do the same basic job at a lower price than premium brands. Bread can be frozen in portions if the household does not use it quickly enough. Dry pasta should be kept sealed, dry, and protected from pantry pests. Flour should also be stored in a sealed container. If you buy a large amount and use it slowly, a cooler environment helps maintain quality better. A common mistake is stocking too many bakery products just because they are on sale. Bread and baked goods do not have the same storage advantage as dry pasta or flour if you do not have suitable freezer space. And that is why wheat is worth watching. It does not need to make one product rise sharply to create major pressure. If just one commodity gets squeezed, the effect can spread from one farm field to almost an entire aisle, and then show up multiple times on the same grocery receipt. 5. Chocolate. Here is a contradiction that any shopper has every right to question. If cocoa has gotten much cheaper, why is chocolate on the shelf still expensive? At the end of 2024, cocoa futures climbed above $12,000 per metric ton. But by 2026, cocoa prices had fallen nearly 70% from that peak. If you only look at the commodity market, you might expect chocolate bars to quickly become cheaper again too. But retail does not move that fast. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that the candy and chewing gum category in the United States was still 9.6% higher than a year earlier. Sugar and sweets overall were up about 7.4%. This is the price lag. A chocolate bar does not contain only cocoa. The final price also reflects sugar, dairy, manufacturing, packaging, freight, labor, and retailer margin. More importantly, chocolate companies do not buy all of their cocoa at today's price. They also work with contracts, hedging arrangements, and inventories that were purchased earlier. So when the cocoa commodity price falls sharply, the retail price usually does not react immediately, and we are seeing that happen. In the second quarter of 2026, Hershey said price realization increased by about 10 points, while volume declined about 8%. Cocoa costs have started to cool, but the chocolate aisle has not become cheaper again right away. The years of expensive cocoa also changed the product itself. Some manufacturers made bars smaller, added more wafers, nuts, or fillings, reduced the amount of cocoa in some products, or developed alternatives that use less cocoa. When the commodity price falls, those changes do not automatically reverse overnight either. That is why shoppers need to look beyond the sticker price. A common mistake is seeing a chocolate bar still priced almost the same and thinking the price has stabilized, while the package may be smaller. Compare price per ounce, especially between multi-packs, seasonal candy, and different sizes. For storage, chocolate should be kept in a cool, dry place and away from constant temperature changes. Refrigerating it and then taking it back out repeatedly can create condensation and make the texture worse. And if chocolate develops a white coating on the surface, do not throw it away right away. It may just be fat bloom or sugar bloom, and does not necessarily mean the chocolate has spoiled. The most important point about number 5 is this: commodity prices can fall very quickly. Retail prices usually come down more slowly. Shoppers today are not just paying for today's cocoa, they are also paying for contracts, inventories, packaging decisions, and pricing strategies that were formed when cocoa was still expensive. The ingredient price has gone down the stairs. The shelf price tag still hasn't followed it down. 4. Whole bean, ground coffee. Americans can skip steak for a week, but tell them to skip their Monday morning cup of coffee, and that becomes a completely different negotiation. Coffee is not something people buy occasionally. For millions of households, it is a morning routine, so when the price goes up, shoppers feel it again and again, day after day. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that coffee prices in the United States were 10.3% higher than a year earlier. Roasted coffee specifically, the category closest to whole bean and ground coffee, was about 9.4% higher. But coffee has one very important characteristic. High prices today cannot create more coffee beans next month. A coffee farmer has to go through an entire long cycle: planting, tree maturity, flowering, fruit development, harvest, processing, and only then export. A new tree takes years before it produces significant commercial output. That is the long biological recovery. What is interesting is that supply is improving right now. USDA forecasts world coffee production for the 2026 to 2027 season at a record of about 189.7 million 60-kilogram bags, up about 10.8 million bags from the previous season. Global coffee prices have also fallen about 25% over the past 7 months, as supply has improved. But coffee is still especially sensitive because production is concentrated in a few regions. Brazil plays an enormous role in Arabica. Vietnam and Indonesia are especially important for Robusta, and together those two countries account for about half of global Robusta production. That means a weather problem in just a few major producing regions can quickly spread through the global market. That risk is worth watching as El Niño strengthens. Heat and dryness could put pressure on Robusta production in Vietnam and Indonesia in the next cycle. For shoppers, this is where cost per cup matters more than just looking at the price of a bag. Whole beans usually hold their aroma better after opening if stored properly. Ground coffee is more convenient, but it has more surface area exposed to air, so the flavor can decline faster. Coffee should be kept in a sealed container, in a cool, dry place and away from strong light. A common mistake is leaving the bag open near the stove, where there is heat and moisture. A large bag is not always more economical either. If the household takes months to use it all and the coffee has already gone stale, the lower price per pound may not actually provide better value. So coffee is not a story of supply collapsing. Production is actually recovering right now. What matters is that supply responds very slowly. If a major growing region runs into trouble, the price signal can appear almost immediately. But coffee trees cannot. You can raise the price in one day. You cannot plant a coffee tree on Monday and harvest it on Friday. Instant coffee. Instant coffee is usually bought for three very simple reasons: fast, convenient, and relatively affordable. You do not need a coffee machine, no grinder, no filters, just hot water, a spoon, and a few minutes. But that is exactly what makes the latest number so notable. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that instant coffee in the United States was 15.8% higher than a year earlier. Over the same period, roasted coffee rose about 9.4%, while food at home increased only 2.7%. In other words, the coffee that many people choose because it is simple and economical is rising faster than regular roasted coffee itself. Why? Part of the answer is in what is inside the jar. Instant coffee is not simply roasted coffee ground very finely. The coffee first has to be roasted and brewed on an industrial scale. The liquid coffee is then concentrated, and most of the water is removed, usually through spray drying or freeze drying, to create powder or granules that can dissolve again. That adds processing, drying, energy, packaging, and manufacturing to the product before it reaches the shelf. This does not prove that processing is the only reason the price rose 15.8%. Raw coffee costs still matter a lot, but it explains why instant coffee should not be viewed as simply a simpler version of ground coffee. You are buying a product that has been pre-processed in exchange for convenience, and that convenience has its own value. Instant coffee is shelf-stable, easy to portion, and does not require brewing equipment. During travel, a blackout, or in an emergency pantry, it can make a cup of coffee with less equipment and less preparation than regular ground coffee. That is a separate advantage that ground coffee does not completely have. For shoppers, the first tip is to compare cost per cup, not just the price of the jar. A larger container may be cheaper per serving, but only if the household actually uses it all. The most common mistake is letting moisture get into the jar. Instant coffee absorbs moisture very easily, causing the granules to clump and the quality to decline. Use a dry spoon. Close the lid immediately after taking out the coffee, and keep the container in a cool, dry place. Another mistake is buying too much just because it is on sale. Instant coffee lasts a long time, but flavor and aroma can still decline after the container has been open for a long period. So the biggest jar is not always the best value. Instant coffee is chosen to cut down on time, equipment, and effort. But in 2026, its price is rising faster than regular roasted coffee. The item chosen for convenience and savings is showing that even that convenience is no longer as cheap as it used to be. 2. Steaks and beef roasts. Some foods do not disappear from the grocery store. They just quietly shift from an everyday food into something for special occasions. Steak and beef roast are moving closer to that line. For many older adults, beef roast used to be tied to Sunday dinner. Steak might be something for a family cookout. A roast bought on sale could be split into several meals or kept in the freezer for the following week. But when prices stay high long enough, the way people look at the food changes too. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that uncooked beef steaks in the United States were 9.6% higher than a year earlier. Beef roasts were up as much as 13.5%, while food at home overall rose only about 2.7%. That is no longer a small change on the price tag. Shoppers start buying steak less often, choosing smaller portions, switching to cheaper cuts, waiting for promotions, or simply skipping the meat aisle. And that is when luxury creep shows up. Not because steak suddenly becomes a luxury product, but because something that used to be fairly normal in the household menu gradually becomes something people need a reason to buy. A birthday, holiday, cookout, or a week with a good enough sale. This is a very clear sign of food inflation. Food does not have to disappear to lose its old place in everyday life. Beef still has value because it provides protein, iron, zinc, and vitamin B12. So instead of giving it up completely, many households may use it in more economical ways. Compare cost per serving, not just price per pound. Cheaper cuts used for slow cooking or braising can provide more servings than premium steaks. A roast can also be divided into portions before freezing, so you only thaw what you need. A common mistake is buying beef on sale without having a plan to use it. If it ends up with freezer burn or gets forgotten for too long, the original discount is no longer savings, and the bigger story is still in the moment when a shopper looks at steak and thinks, maybe another time. When that happens, inflation has done more than raise the price. It has changed the place of that food in the household budget. A staple does not have to become a luxury. It only has to gradually become an occasion food. 1. Ground beef. Ground beef is number one. Not because it is the most expensive type of beef. It is here because almost the entire system behind it is under pressure at the same time. In July 2026, USDA reported that the United States had about 28.5 million beef cows, down 1% from a year earlier. The number of calves born also fell about 2%. Meanwhile, the number of heifers being kept for breeding increased again, showing that some ranchers are trying to rebuild the herd. Having more beef in the future sometimes means accepting less supply right now. The female cattle being kept for breeding will not be sent to slaughter right away, while calves need many months to grow before becoming beef supply. The pressure then spreads to processing. Tyson Foods announced the closure of facilities in Joslyn, Illinois, and Eagle Mountain, Utah, while also looking for a buyer for its plant in Pasco, Washington, as the supply of cattle for slaughter remains very limited. What is notable is that consumers are paying more for beef, but processors can still lose money. Tyson forecast that its beef segment could lose about $500 to $650 million in fiscal year 2026, mainly because cattle purchasing costs are too high. The closure of a large plant also affects workers, ranchers, transportation, and processing capacity across the region. Eventually, that pressure shows up directly on the shopper's bill. It appears in hamburgers, tacos, chili, meatloaf, spaghetti sauce, and casseroles. Very ordinary meals during the week. When ground beef gets more expensive, it is not just about one dinner. It directly affects the family budget and reflects the pressure across the entire system. What is changing is not necessarily that these foods are disappearing from America. What may disappear first is the price we once considered normal. A cattle shortage, a smaller wheat crop, a weak salmon season, or a coffee crop facing problems may seem unrelated. But in the end, they can all meet in the same place: your grocery bill. What matters is not panicking, but noticing changes early, waiting for sales, switching brands, buying only what you need, and reducing waste. Affordability usually does not disappear in a single day. It slips away little by little, through price tags that become harder and harder to accept. Of these 12 items, which one where you live has made you look at the price tag twice?